Today, our lesson is on telling and writing time and time intervals. So, today you're going to learn how to correctly tell time to the nearest minute on an analog clock, and you're also going to recognize the importance of time in everyday life. Your essential questions are: why is knowing how to tell time on both analog and digital clocks important? What is the importance of knowing the difference between the hours and the minutes on a clock? And also, how is time essential to our everyday routine and lives? So, to start our lesson, we're going to look at how time is relevant to your everyday life. So, here we have Ryan's routine. So, you're going to take a look at his routine and you're going to write the correct time that's appropriate to his action. But it's important to look at the AM and PM of each time because we know that AM is morning and PM is afternoon or anytime that's after 12 p.m. So now you're going to pause your video and you're going to write out number 1 through 8 on a piece of paper and you're going to write the corresponding time. Once you're done, play the video and we'll check our answers. So now that you've completed the activity, let's check our answers. So for when Ryan wakes up for school, you should have 6:58 a.m. For number 2, Ryan eats breakfast, you should have 7:11 a.m. For Ryan's school day begins, you should have 8:20 a.m. Ryan eats lunch at 12 p.m. because that's the afternoon. Ryan's school day ends at 3:15. Ryan eats dinner at 6:35 and Ryan gets into bed at 9:07 and Ryan wakes up in the middle of the night at 12 a.m. So now we see how relevant time is and how much we rely on time every day. But to understand time, we need to know how to write time and we need to know how to tell time. So let's look at an analog and a digital clock. So right now, I want you to take a moment and I want you to predict which clock is an analog clock and which clock is a digital clock. I also want you to compare and contrast their differences. Similarities and differences, sorry. So, if you said that the clock on the left was digital, you're correct. And if you said that the clock on the right was analog, you're also correct. So, what's the difference? Here on the digital clock, we have the numbers displayed numerically. And here on the analog clock, you see that we have a minute hand, an hour hand, and a second hand on the face of the clock that points to the numbers. So, what's the difference between the hours and minutes? So, here we have an analog clock with a minute hand and an hour hand. So, again, I want you to predict which one's the hour hand and which one's the minute hand. So, take a moment and do that. So, if you said that this was the minute hand, you're correct. And if you pointed to this one and said it was the hour hand, you're also correct. What's the difference and how can you tell? So, we know the hour hand is always the shorter hand compared to the minute hand, which is longer. So, here the minute or the hour hand is almost at the 4, but not quite. And the minute hand is pointing to the 11, which is 55 minutes. So here our time is 3:55. So here we have our digital clock. And again, I want you to predict which side shows the hours and which hand shows the minutes. And if you said the left showed the hours, you're correct, and the right shows the minutes. So now we're going to move into some guided practice. So here I'm going to display different times on this clock and I'm going to have you reflect and pause and reflect and determine what the time is. Okay, so if you said the time here was 10:27, you are correct. So we see that the hour hand is in between the 10 and the 11, but it's not at the 11 yet, so it's still 10 o'clock. And here we have the minute hand at the 27. So your time here is 10:27. Okay, let's try one more. Okay, take a moment. If you said the time was 2:49, you're correct. So here the hour hand is super close to the 3, but it's not quite at the 3 yet. And the minute hand is at the 49. So your time here is 2:49. Back to our PowerPoint, we're going to move into some independent practice. So I'm going to have you complete the independent practice by inserting arrows to draw the correct time. And then for these bottom three, you're going to insert a text box to write the correct time. You can access this by using this link. After you complete the independent practice, we'll go over the answers in the next slide. So pause your video now. Okay, now that you completed your independent practice, we'll go over the answers. So number one, you should have drawn two arrows, one almost at the 8, but not quite, and your minute hand should be right on the 11, showing 55. Number two, your minute or your hour hand should almost be at the 5, but not quite yet, and your minute hand should be pointing at 53. And for number three, your hour hand should be super duper close to the 8, but not quite. And your minute hand should be at 56. So here we had to write the time. So looking at number one, our hour hand is almost at the 12, but not yet. So it's still 11 o'clock. So you should have written 11:37 here. For number two, our hour hand is only a little past the 7, so we know it's still 7 o'clock. And our minutes are pointing to the 12. So your time is 7:12. And for number three, your hour hand is almost, or they're almost right on top of each other. So it's in between the 6 and 7. So we go back, it's still 6 o'clock, and your minute hand is pointing to 33. So your time is 6:33. And now you're going to complete your exit ticket for this activity using the same doc that you used for your independent practice. It's at the bottom here. And you're going to write one thing you notice that is different between the analog and digital clock. This is when we compared and contrasted them. You're going to write one question or clarification you still have. Number three, you're going to highlight the correct answer, which is asking you about the hour and the minute hand. And four, you're going to complete the clock question. Now you're going to move into activity 2.